Hi, this is Shelley Kraft, and welcome to SNN Live. We're at the Cambridge House Resource Conference 2012, and I have standing next to me Jim Letourneau from Big Picture Speculator, one of the most well-known newsletters in the entire North American, and for that matter, globally. Jim, welcome to SNN Live.
Thank you, Shelley.
Now, what are you, as a featured speaker, speaking about at the Cambridge House Conference?
I speak about energy, metals, and technology companies.
That's a mouthful.
Well, anything for a buck is the simplest way to say it.
So now, what's the highlight of what you spoke about today?
There are a lot of graphite companies that are doing some really good promotional work, and maybe one or two of them actually have some good technologies to make some interesting end products. Maybe they do. So it'll be curious. It'll be curious to see how they play out.
I like graphite. Well, it's actually graphene, right?
Well, there's a lot of steps between graphite and graphene, and not very many companies are going to be able to make it all the way to manufacturing graphene. So the challenge is which companies are actually going to have that capability. That's the challenge.
See, not many folks know that. I only know it because we've actually had a graphite company advertised in one of our issues of the magazine. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known anything about it.
Okay. Yeah, that's the challenge, is seeing who has technology, who has patents, who has a process. And then the challenge is they can say they have a process. How do they prove it works? Have they convinced a big company to come in and be a partner with them? So time will tell. I'm prepared to be a little bit skeptical these days.
So what do you like about the oil and gas industry?
Well, fossil fuels are still a big chunk of our energy today. They're not going away anytime soon. There's some really interesting big discovery potentials on the oil shale side that are interesting. We've been so successful at shale gas that we've driven natural gas prices down to very low levels. As a society, that's not a bad thing. How is cheap natural gas a problem? North America has the cheapest natural gas in the world. Thank you very much. Like, a lot of geologists, engineers, and geophysicists came up with that. That's not a bad problem to have. And that's how commodity bull markets end. They do end, and they end because of technology.
Now, that's a good segue. Tell me what you think about technology these days.
Things are happening, when I look at how my parents lived, rural Western Canada, they didn't have toilet paper, they didn't have running water. That wasn't that long ago. And now we're in an amazing world where things are advancing very quickly. I think the iPhone's one of the best examples. It's a camera. It makes movies. It records sound. You can drop it from 2 stories and it'll still work. Does your email, and a bunch of other amazing things. And they could make them even smaller, but our fingers are too big. So technology is going to solve. I'm an optimist. I think technology is going to solve a lot of problems.
So where do we go from here? If you had to pick one thing to tell our viewers, this is an audience of investors and professionals. You tell me the one thing that Jim Letourneau wants to be remembered for in this interview. What is that?
I would say my talk tomorrow is going to be about hype cycles. Hype cycles show a very rapid rise and then fall, and then kind of a linear increase. Most of the time, it takes a lot of hype and excitement to raise the money to get projects up and running. If it's a viable project, it'll continue to be successful. This happens over 5 or 10 years. Uranium companies are a very good example. Uranium companies 8 years ago were just the hottest thing ever, and then they all crashed. And that part of the hype cycle is called the trough of disillusionment. So I like to say you're not being a pig if you're feeding at the trough of disillusionment. You will not get slaughtered, because there's some very good viable companies that are real, and they've survived that hype cycle and are actually advancing towards production. So it's a very good place to look.
That's a good viewpoint. I kind of like that. Well, now tell me a little bit about your newsletter.
Well, my newsletter is called the Big Picture Speculator, and it's at bigpicturespeculator.com. I also blog at jimletourneau.com, and on Twitter it's at Jim Letourneau.
Anything else? Facebook?
I'm on Facebook too, but I'm not using it as much.
I understand. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Letourneau, a familiar face, especially if you go to financial conferences around the globe. Big Picture Speculator, newsletter, featured speaker, panel member, you name it, you do it, right?
I show up.
Thanks for coming on to SNN.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Pleasure.